there is an element of like the people that can invite the most to your church are people that are newer to your church. Because I do think there is an element of like, okay, you know, whoever, Jane at your church that's been at your church for 7 years and she's really an ambassador for your church. She loves the church. After 7 years, she's probably invited a lot of people in her life already to church.
And they already go to the church.
Or they made their decision.
Yes.
I absolutely do not want to go with Jane to church.
Right.
But there is something about new people. If you have this like inviter culture, when you connect to a new person, let's say this person comes to your church and God changes their life and they get baptized. Now they have this whole new market of people that they can invite to. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that 1,000,000%. We recently had, this isn't quite the same as an event, but we recently had a baptism for a new believer who had struggled in the past, and most of his friends had also struggled in the past. He got baptized recently and he invited 55 people and they all came.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's like he had that new believer energy, but he had not been at Mercy Hill really plugged in very long. But once he got plugged in, he wanted to tell the world.
Right.
And I mean, I think that same mentality kind of carries over into everything.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. I am super excited today to have Ashley Smith with us. I'm Pastor Bobby. Today's topic is going to be really great because, you know, Breaking Barriers is all about helping churches and helping pastors grow so that they can go. And so we want to provide a ton of value add content for that. And so today's topic, I think, is really going to help us to do that. And today what we're going to be talking about is how do we capitalize on the calendar, different holidays, Christmas, Easter, all that stuff? How do we capitalize on the calendar to partner with our people to help them to invite their friends and their coworkers to church? Before we get into that, though, let me introduce Ashley and just kind of talk a little bit about this topic, and then we'll kind of dive pretty deep on it. So Ashley has been on our staff for about 4 years, kind of right after COVID started. We realized, with so many different things, churches already were kind of digital in terms of having a website and stuff like that. But we just realized that we needed to make a concerted effort to do a better job with communication and marketing and all of that. And so that's where we connect with Ashley. She's been our staff for 4 years, but over the last couple of years, her focus has been more and more on, really kind of strategically using the different big events on the calendar to help our people invite and to design those events, to help design the communication around those events. So Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Bobby. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about like what your role has just kind of been like, just thinking about marketing events, all of that.
So a lot of times people view marketing and events as two separate things. But I think in almost any context, marketing and events are one and the same, especially, as the world is growing with like social media and how things are just being portrayed everywhere. Like events and marketing truly do go hand in hand. So I came on staff as a marketing strategist, really, and it has evolved into me focusing on big days and how we can use those big days to kind of leverage our mission of growing and going.
So would you say like marketing has a lot of different components to it?
Yes.
Would you just say events is like one part of that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's definitely one part of it that touches all the other parts of marketing.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's really important at the very beginning of this podcast today to just kind of define what marketing is and talk a little bit about that before we get into like how to design these big days. Because I've seen people say this, and I think it's just it's somewhat of a misunderstanding. People will say like, just the very concept of marketing and the church, people will say like, oh, that's kind of the, that's the problem. That's the businessification of the church, and it's using all these business principles for the church. And I would just say not really, because I don't think marketing is anything more than just creative communication.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I mean, you look throughout the New Testament, I mean, communication, the way we communicate to people, it's just extremely important. And if any church has a website, uses email, uses basic technologies, like you're already doing marketing and communication.
Yes.
You may just not really have a strategy behind it.
Right.
How would you define marketing, like coming from that world?
Yeah, I definitely would define it as everything you just said. So any form of communication, you're telling people something that you're going to do, but it's also equipping people to tell people for you in all the different avenues. I will say, you know, to your point about people feel icky sometimes with marketing in church. When I first did come here, you know, my background is corporate, so I was not fully familiar with church marketing. I did research a lot of other churches, looked at staff pages, and like very few churches have a marketing person. And it seems very much like it's one of the last positions that get hired as a church is growing, and it really should be the opposite.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that it's one of the last positions?
Yeah.
I just think for what you said, I think there's this like general context around a marketing person in a church that just feels kind of like icky. I don't know. It's just this idea that like, we don't need a marketing person. What we're doing on Sundays is going to help us grow. When really it's like, well, how are you going to get people there on Sunday to hear you so you can grow? So I think a lot of people are just thinking about it backwards.
Right. So one of the things, you know, what we're going to talk about today is like, okay, you know, Christmas, for example, you know, like you want to communicate that in a really creative way to help your people invite. And then obviously the event itself. But like, even before that, because you kind of brought it up a little bit, like, I think it's really important to understand that at the end of the day, like word of mouth is like kind of the best advertising and the best marketing.
For sure.
And it's not to say like you don't do marketing because you have word of mouth, but really your marketing and your advertising and all that, it's really just trying to give more momentum to that word of mouth.
Absolutely. That's why the influencer world has blown up like it has. I mean, you've got people that are like, you know, word of mouth ambassadors for things. And that whole world of marketing has blown up. I mean, that's a whole different branch in its own of marketing. And I mean, really focusing on marketing in a church context is really just creating a strategy around that using your congregation. So it's just interesting to kind of think that people kind of see that backwards and that they don't need to put energy on that on the front end.
What would you say is like the power behind word of mouth? Like why does somebody on the other side of the word of mouth, why does word of mouth feel more maybe authentic or legit than like seeing a commercial about something?
The same way that Google reviews sell products. I mean, it's just the reputation of having an actual person tell you something that, you know, if someone invites you to church, it's like, oh, you trust that person. You have a similar perspective on things. So we must have the same idea of what something should be. So I'll like it if you like it. So I think that's why word of mouth is so powerful.
Yeah, I think there's like an element of like if you're getting word of mouth from somebody who's like paid to sell a product, that doesn't feel the same thing as, like you're saying, you go to Google, you see a random review, and in many ways it's like, you know, that person, there's nothing they're getting probably for writing that review. So you can be like, okay, that was like their legit experience, you know? Right. And I think word of mouth in the church is very much the same way. Like, some people, if they invite a friend to church, that friend may be like, okay, is there an ulterior motive here? Like, what are their intentions? But for the most part, when someone just like legit invites somebody else into something, hey, come check out, you know, my club's soccer team, or, hey, I heard about this movie, you should go watch it, or have you heard this new, you know, whatever CD that's released? There's just like an authenticity to hearing somebody share their experience. And around these big days in communication, all we're doing is just trying to bridge the gap of like helping people actually do that. Absolutely.
The big day itself is the tool that we're giving our people to go out and use word of mouth strategy and invite people to. The big day is the tool. We're just giving it to them as something for them to use.
So let's dive into that a little bit more. Yeah. When we say big days, what do we even mean by that? Why are people more likely to come to a big day versus just coming to church on any weekend?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, especially where we are in the South, you've got people who, for generations and generations, their families go to church on Christmas and Easter. And there's other big points in the year where this happens as well, but traditionally, Christmas and Easter are the biggest. And I mean, we could do nothing and still see a lot more people come through the door. So why not optimize that and really blow it out of the water and get the most people here that we can?
Right. So when you say optimize it, in your experience, because I would say at Mercy Hill, we've gotten better each year at this. Way back in the day, Mercy Hill, even before you were on staff, sometimes with Easter, we would just do nothing different. We would just have our Easter services, and we weren't, it's not that we weren't encouraging people to invite, but we weren't really doing anything special to try to really partner with our people. So, when you say hey, invest more in it, what are you talking about? Give people some real context. If people have no context for investing in a big day.
Yeah. I mean, people invite at all different levels. Some people it's really easy for them to walk up to a random person they don't know and invite them to church. Other people, that's really hard. So these big days are kind of the tools that let people's guards down on both sides of that, the person inviting and the person that's being invited. So I think for us, investing the money in these big days and giving them the tools and the opportunity to invite, it's worth every dollar that we put into it.
So what are we doing unique around these days to invest more in them?
I think what we're doing is we're really opening ourselves up to the community. With Christmas and Easter, we leave our campuses. We go into the community. We give people a place to go that feels like common ground, so they don't feel like they're walking into a place where they might already feel uncomfortable. It's also easier to invite somebody to a place that's a community. It's open to the whole community versus, hey, come to my church that you drive by every single week, but still don't feel comfortable going to. I don't think an invite is going to make them feel any more comfortable coming to a church building all the time. So I think that's something that we do different is we really kind of put ourselves in the community. We take our resources and we do that. It also allows us to really partner with other agencies in the community, like the facilities that we're going to. So that also gives us opportunity for them to tell people about us. So we're letting them invite for us as well. So it's more than just kind of in our church. We're putting ourselves out there for everyone to come and let their guard down.
Yeah. So the principle is okay, let's just take Easter or Christmas as an example.
Sure.
We're 4 months before Christmas or 4 months before Easter. And I would imagine almost anywhere in the United States, there is some celebration of Christmas. Maybe not Easter as much, but at least Christmas, right? So you could be in New York City and people are celebrating Christmas, right? So there's some element of if you did nothing extra, you probably are maybe going to get more people at your church on that weekend. So in light of that reality, our teams 4 or 5 months before this event, we're saying, okay, there's already going to be this built-in momentum around this holiday, around this weekend. What can we do to help our people even have more momentum around that from a communication perspective? So go ahead.
Yeah, as far as actual tools, how we kind of get the word out.
Yeah, exactly. How are we thinking about helping our people invite?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, a lot of it is getting the word out early, letting people know that something's coming. That's a really big thing, especially around holidays, is it's kind of it's a fine line because yeah, you're optimizing on a big day, but it's kind of a saturated market. When you think about events that are going on around a big day, holiday time. So you kind of got to get the word out early. So people put yours at a higher priority. So you get your people out there already talking about it. So for us, I mean, logistically speaking, we give our people all the tools. What
are all the tools?
Yeah, we do all the things we can. So we do emails, we do social media inviters. We've done yard signs. We do inviter cards. We do door hangers. We do everything that you can imagine that would equip somebody to go out and invite somebody in the way that fits for them. Because like I said earlier, it's like it's not everyone can easily walk up to a stranger in a coffee shop. But it's pretty easy for some people to take an inviter card out of their pocket and hand it to the person who made their coffee. It's a conversation starter. So that's what we try to do a lot of, is just provide conversation starters. And honestly, that's what these big days are, is they're a conversation starter when they're in a community space, especially. When you're going to a place where normally tickets to a show are $80 to $100 and you're offering something for free. You're giving people an opportunity to start a conversation about, hey, you should come to this free event that's happening. And it just really lets everybody's guard down.
Yeah. How do we create this culture of this so that, because I have felt that we have more and more of the culture of this as each year goes by. Because there is some element at first where you're like, hey, here's these social media graphics. Hey, here's these inviter cards. Go invite your friends. And you're trying to create that culture. You're trying to tell them what to do. There's an element where that works, but like that's not as good as your people wanting to do that. And your people catching the vision and sometimes it can take a number of years for your people to catch the vision of like, oh no, I want to invite somebody to this. That's one step beyond just like telling your people to do it.
Absolutely. And I think the shift that I've noticed in the excitement for that over the years has honestly been our staff and leadership getting behind it more and them doing it organically. We're seeing Andrew share more on social. You're sharing more on social media. We're just getting a lot better at casting vision for these things from the stage. And so I think people are starting to really understand it. And it's become part of the bloodstream of who we are. And we've just kind of we have that reputation now of like, we do these days well. And you want to be there. And I think people just kind of understand that and they appreciate it. And they know that when they invite somebody to something, we're not going to let them down.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. Like over time, encouraging partnering with your people around these big days and encouraging them to invite. But over time, I think people begin to see and understand the culture of it. And I do think it can take multiple years.
Yeah,
like sure. I noticed this past year for Christmas, we've been doing big Christmas events for a long time. But I just noticed this past year, it felt like a tipping point where we weren't necessarily telling people, hey, go to your social media and share this specific thing or whatever. But I just started seeing dozens and dozens of people share that on social media. And I was seeing names that people like their names I didn't recognize.
Right. I agree completely. And I mean, there's people that come to those events that we don't necessarily always see regularly throughout the year, but that doesn't mean we won't at some point. So it's really, doing these big events, it's kind of like the catch for all these people who want to be here more, but they're not quite bought in enough. So it's like, it's a good kind of checkpoint for them. Yeah. Every year, twice a year, whatever it is that they come to.
Yeah, it's such a basic thing, but like, talking about like a social media graphic, it's like, well, what can that do? But it really is that good combination, I think, between like word of mouth and marketing.
Yes.
Because when somebody shares something on social media, obviously it is word of mouth in many ways, because they're basically just saying, I affiliate with this thing, or I like this thing, or I enjoy this thing, or whatever. It is word of mouth in that sense, but it kind of has some scalable kind of marketing communication side to it.
Yes.
Sure. And so there's just something unique when your people start doing that.
Yeah, and it's awesome. And I can always tell, I track all the registrations for all these big days. And I also do all the digital marketing for them currently. So like the emails, the text messages and things like that. And it's always so interesting to me, like I can tell when someone has pushed it really hard, either like it's Andrew or you or someone in the church that people follow, because it's like you see registrations creep up like in a little chunk of time. And so it's like I always try to go back and see like, oh, what was it that made, things jump in that little short period of time. And I do always see that too when we send an email that's church-wide or text message, but you can also see those little jumps whenever like influencers in our world share it. And so it's just kind of cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Another part of this, I just would love to get your thoughts on this is, and I've never like looked at the specific data or anything, but there is an element of like the people that can invite the most to your church are people that are newer to your church. Because I do think there is an element of like, okay, whoever, Jane at your church that's been at your church for 7 years and she's really an ambassador for your church. She loves the church. After 7 years, she's probably invited a lot of people in her life already to church.
And they already go to the church.
Or they made their decision.
Yes.
I absolutely do not want to go with Jane to church.
Right.
But there is something about new people. If you have this like inviter culture, when you connect to a new person, let's say this person comes to your church and God changes their life and they get baptized. Now they have this whole new market of people that they can invite to. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that 1,000,000%. We recently had, this isn't quite the same as an event, but we recently had a baptism for a new believer who had struggled in the past, and most of his friends had also struggled in the past. He got baptized recently and he invited 55 people and they all came.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's like he had that new believer energy, but he had not been at Mercy Hill really plugged in very long. But once he got plugged in, he wanted to tell the world.
Right.
And I mean, I think that same mentality kind of carries over into everything.
Yeah, there's something, there's just something sticky about like, okay, Jane has been going to Mercy Hill forever. People already know she goes to church, yada, yada, yada. Well, then you have somebody that just got baptized and everybody in their life actually knows that they don't go to church. And now all of a sudden, let's just call him John. Now all of a sudden, John is talking about church and talking about, man, come check this out. People's antennas kind of go up at that point of
it's a surprise. It's
Right.
not as much like, oh, here's Jane again.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think if we have that, man, always partnering with our people around big days to encourage them to invite.
Yes.
And then people are coming to Christ at our church and getting baptized. They can now invite their friends. It can just over time, and we got to be patient.
Yes.
We got to be patient. I mean, I think long-term, marketing and communications, like it's kind of a flywheel effect, I do think, over multiple years. But I think over time we could end up seeing lots of, first-time guests because people are inviting them.
I mean, to your point about Christmas, we were on year 3, and that was the year where it was like, it really felt like everything tipped, like in a good way. Like people were coming and we weren't even really having to tell them about it.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I think we have done these types of events for probably 3 or 4 years where we're really trying to capitalize on the events to partner with our people to invite more people. I feel like we got over some sort of, I don't know, we saw some sort of breakthrough this past Christmas.
Yes.
We had done Christmas for the past 3 years. Downtown Greensboro, we rent a big facility down there right in the dead center of the city. And something just happened with the momentum this past year. I think sometimes when you do things in threes, sometimes it just takes time. But talk to people, like, let's go through this whole thing, okay, about like capitalizing on the calendar, partnering with your people. Like, how did we approach this event? Let's just go 6 months before the event. Like, what do we start doing in terms of the planning and all of that?
Sure. So we secure the venue, honestly, about a year in advance.
It's crazy.
It's crazy how early we have to kind of get in on the calendar. I mean, this is a place where Broadway shows are happening. The calendar is full. So if we wanted it, we had to get in on it and commit. So we would start the planning there. Then we would go into picking our dates and our times. And I can't ever say that that's a quick conversation. There's always a lot of debate around it. But this is an area where I feel like having more opinions is better. Because you can sit in a little silo and think that what you picked out is perfect. But then you talk to someone in a different life situation and it's like, actually, if we did this time instead of that, we could probably get 1,000 more people. Because you're not over nap time or during dinner time, or hey, people might travel on that day. So it's just, sitting in a room and figuring out those times. And there's a strategy to that. It's not just randomly picking stuff.
So let me stop you there. So sometimes I would say that's maybe 3 or 4 weeks of discussion, just literally picking the times.
Yes.
So Easter is simple. Not simple, but
I wouldn't say simple.
Right, but you have Easter Sunday,
Yes.
Christmas can be a little bit more complicated because it's falling on different days, and different people have different stuff that's happening with their work when they're getting off. And so basically we're just looking at, okay, we want the most amount of people there. Mm-hmm. And so we're creatively debating strategically, man, what are the best times? Do we do multiple in one day? Do we spread them across multiple days?
Yes.
Where does Christmas fall? Where does Christmas Eve fall?
Yes.
All that stuff.
I'll say we're already nervous about next year.
Why?
With that conversation, because I believe Christmas is on a Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah, this past year it was on Sunday.
Yeah, so it worked out really well,
Yep.
the way that it fell. But, it gets kind of tricky, and it's a really big conversation and super important, and it should not be handled lightly, and more than 2 people should do it.
Right.
Because you got to think about traveling and inviting, and, some people invite, like I said, I see the registration. Some people literally sign up 50 people because they're inviting like family that's coming in from out of town,
Right.
cousins,
Right.
coworkers,
Right.
to these things because it's a Christmas event. It's like I said earlier, people are more willing to
Right.
let their guard down over something like that.
All right. So we land on the dates. We got the place
Yep.
booked. What else?
Then we start programming. Really, we, it's all the logistics of worship and production and all those things, and spend time on that. I think a lot of times people think that the holiday speaks for itself and why people are coming there, but I think putting a lot of energy and effort behind what they're going to see when they get there is really important. This year for Tanger, we bought the bracelets that light up that worked with the music, and it was super cool. And it was just like, it was a very powerful moment for people to share. So obviously night one, we want as many people to share that as possible as part of the programming. So people who haven't signed up yet are like, hey, that's cool, I want to come. So I think focusing on programming really early is good. A lot of things that you might want to order or plan to include in your production take time. So I think starting there is kind of the next step. Definitely identify a really strong team to manage this. I don't ever feel like I think where we saw a good shift in kind of organization for this was having like a person really focus on kind of how everything was functioning instead of each ministry functioning on its own.
Right.
So I think that's another important next step pretty early on is identifying one person to be accountable for all the things. And then next is really just focusing on getting started with marketing. I mean, like I said earlier, the holidays, while they're big days, they're saturated. I mean, Christmas, any mom will tell you the entire month is insane. Mm-hmm. So it's like just thinking ahead, and the earlier
Right.
you can get on calendars, the better. So I have absolutely no shame in sharing Christmas events in the fall when we're talking about back to school, like, hey, here, just so you know, here's what we're thinking. The earlier you can get save the dates out for things, the better. So don't ever think that you need to wait a month or 6 weeks before the event to start sharing it. The earlier.
So how far out, like church-wide, do you feel like we're talking about something like Christmas?
Yeah. So, I mean, we always have phases of how we put things out. We typically try to do a save the date at least 3-ish months out, and a lot of times we have just nailed down exactly where we're going to be with times and what that is. But that's really all the information people need. You don't need to have everything completely, fully planned out before you start giving save the dates. So I would say at least 3 months out, give a save the date for something, and then you start pushing things really hard, social media wise, digital marketing, so email, text, things like that. I mean, you can do that earlier than when you start talking about it from the stage. So I would say 6 to 8 weeks out. On like email communication, just kind of getting people familiar with the language. And then I would say 4 to 5 weeks out, you start really talking about it from the stage. If it's a big day, you're going to need all that time to talk about it. Because not only are you talking about inviting to the event, you're going to start getting into serving for the event and all these other things. So it's like you need to give yourself that time. You can't just start talking about it 2 weeks before and think, oh, it's Christmas, people will come.
How does getting people to serve drive their engagement?
A ton. Getting people plugged in to serve. I mean, we say that all the time. Serving drives or engagement drives attendance.
Right.
So that could not be more true with big days. We always kind of go an extra step in our culture is to ask people to serve one, attend one. But on these big days, we kind of ask a little bit more of people. And what I have found, especially with Christmas, is that it makes people take a lot of ownership over the event, so they feel very involved, and they're actually even more likely to invite. It's almost like a kid in a choir, like they want people to come see them. That's how it is when people serve at these events too.
Yeah. That is to me, that's the breakthrough moment where some people could feel like, okay, my church is trying to get me to do this, right? Or like any of us, if we like a particular brand or something and it's like they're trying to get me to be an ambassador. That's one thing. But when you actually go to that next step of like, no, this is my thing.
Yes.
I'm a part of this. This is my church. I don't see it as like, okay, my spiritual walk and then my church. It's like, no, this is my community. This is my church. When people take that level of ownership, that's where I just feel like we're trying to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you allow people to have that type of ownership, you truly see what their capacity is. And your events and all these things can be even that much greater. Because you've got them really stepping in to help, and you've got them with like ideas and like businesses that can help you and things like that. So it's really cool to see people really take that next step into ownership over big days like this. Yeah,
because at that point, it's not like, hey, come be a part of our thing.
Right.
But they feel ownership around it.
Yes. Like for Christmas, we did a choir. I mean, that's a 50-person choir. The ownership for those people over the production side of what people are watching was awesome, just to see like how excited they were to be there, and think about all the people that those people invited. Think about the people in the lobby greeting, how many people they were like, come see me if you come through the lobby when you come. I mean, it's like there's that accountability too. So I think you absolutely have to get people engaged.
Yeah. Another thing that I've noticed in terms of just like, as we have maybe gotten better with this stuff over time, is that Pastor Andrew, our lead pastor, has really just internalized and cast the vision even more. Like he always has, but I noticed this last year, like even maybe when, we weren't asking, hey, do this in the beginning of the sermon or do this, but like he just began to really internalize, and for multiple weeks leading up to Christmas, just casting the vision to the church on all the parts of this. Yeah. On serving, on being involved, on the impact it's going to have, on inviting your friends.
Yeah, well, I think after our first year at Tanger, when we did Christmas, I think we were all a little nervous to do it. We weren't sure exactly what the perception was going to be, but I think we were met with like overwhelming appreciation from our people. And I think for him, knowing that, seeing that, and feeling that, it gave him like an extra like, okay, we're really going to drive this home. We're going to do this, and we're going to give our people the tools that they appreciate. So I do think that, him pushing it more and truly getting behind it and having the vision for it to cast that has helped us a lot.
Yeah. This is really great. Any closing thoughts? I mean, I think this is going to be super helpful for people. I mean, one of my big takeaways for anybody that's listening would be, this doesn't necessarily require like this insane amount of money or like this huge staff. Some of it is just thinking about it more, just creatively thinking about these events more, talking about them more, casting the vision, sending an email doesn't cost money, putting a post on Facebook, casting the vision for this at the beginning of a sermon. That doesn't cost, you don't have to have a huge staff, because the church can do this. Like, I mean, they could be 100-person church and do a good job with this.
Yeah.
Casting the vision for Christmas. So that's one of my big takeaways. Like, man, it's just spending the time and energy to strategically think about this. Any other big takeaways that you would just want to kind of leave people with?
I mean, my biggest thing is just plan early. And like you said, take the time to strategically figure out how you want to talk about this and how you want to equip your people. And I think we underestimate the value of like telling our congregation what we want them to do. And that kind of can sound icky, because you're like, hey, go do this for us. But people want to do that. People want to help you. They want to invite people into something that they love and appreciate. So I don't think we need to undervalue that at all.
Yeah, like this year we did, we've not really done it in the past, like yard signs for Easter, Yeah. And I live like 25 minutes north of the church, kind of out in the country. And I see the yard signs everywhere. I don't even know where they're, I don't know the people or the properties or whatever, but people, like you said, like there's a lot of people that they want to do that.
There's pride in it. I mean, it's
Totally.
cool. People love it. That's the same reason you see people with bumper stickers on their cars. People want to get the word out for you because they're at a place where their life was changed and they want to share that with others.
Yep.
So just give them the tools to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your marketing and communication genius with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I would just encourage you guys listening, if you are a church leader or you're a pastor and this conversation was helpful for you. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, just value add stuff. I would encourage you to check out, we have a private Facebook group where we just post stuff in there all the time. That's just this sort of stuff. Our staff and our leadership team at our church just trying to help you guys grow, trying to help you guys reach more people so that you could send more people. So thank you guys. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.